The message that destroyed my life came on a Tuesday morning. I love you, Margaret. But I need $5,000 for the surgery, or I'll die. My hands were shaking as I logged into my bank account. The balance stared back at me. $1,247. That's all I had left. From $100,000 in life savings to barely enough for next month's rent. The zeros that used to comfort me were gone, vanished, like morning mist. I remember staring at that number, refreshing the page 3 times as if it might magically change, as if this might all be some terrible glitch in the system. But it wasn't a glitch. It was my reality. I'm Margaret Thompson, and I'm 67 years old. 2 years ago, I fell in love with a man who didn't exist. He took everything from me, my money, my dignity, my faith in people. But here's the thing. I'm still here, still breathing, still fighting. And what happened next? Well, that's the part of my story that might just save your life. Because sometimes rock bottom has a basement, and sometimes that basement has a trap door. But if you keep going, if you keep climbing, you might just find your way back to the light. Let me know in the comments where you're watching this from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and trust me, this is one that needs to be heard everywhere. From small towns to big cities, because loneliness doesn't discriminate, and neither do the people who prey on it. To understand how I fell for this, you need to know where I was in my life. My husband Jim had passed away 3 years earlier. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to goodbye. 6 months of watching the man who'd carried me over the threshold become too weak to carry a coffee cup. We'd been married for 38 years. 38 years of Saturday morning pancakes and Sunday crosswords. Of fighting over the thermostat and making up before bed. Of raising 2 kids and welcoming 4 grandchildren. Of building a life so intertwined, I didn't know where he ended. And I began. After Jim died, the house felt like a museum. Every corner held a memory. His coffee mug still sat by the kitchen window, the one with the chip on the handle from when he dropped it during a laughing fit over some joke I can't even remember now. His reading glasses on the nightstand, forever waiting for eyes that would never need them again. His robe hanging on the bathroom door, still smelling faintly of his Old Spice cologne. I couldn't bring myself to move them. Moving them meant accepting he was really gone, and I wasn't ready for that finality. My daughter Sarah lived in Seattle with her family, clear across the country from my home in Tampa. 3,000 miles might as well have been 3 million. My son Michael was always traveling for work, bouncing between Dallas and Denver and Detroit. They called, sure, but Sunday phone calls can't fill the silence of a Tuesday afternoon. They can't sit across from you at dinner, or hold your hand during a scary movie, or just exist in the same space, breathing the same air. I'd retired from my job as a high school English teacher the year before Jim got sick. 35 years of Shakespeare and Steinbeck, of red pens and lesson plans, of watching teenagers discover their voices. We had plans. You know? A cruise to Alaska where we'd finally see those glaciers Jim had been talking about since we were newlyweds. Finally visiting his family's hometown in Ireland, a little village called Ballymore where his grandmother was born. All those some days that never came. All those tomorrows we'd banked on having. The pandemic hit about a year after Jim passed. Suddenly, even my weekly trips to the grocery store became an event. I'd spend an hour getting ready just to buy milk and bread, desperate for any human interaction. Book club moved to Zoom, but it wasn't the same. Have you ever tried to laugh at a joke with your microphone on mute? It's impossible. The computer screen divided us into little boxes, each woman isolated in her own digital square, pretending this was just as good as sharing wine and gossip in person. My world shrank to the size of my living room. I found myself talking to the TV just to hear a voice respond to mine. "Good morning, Matt Lauer," I'd say to the Today Show. "Yes, Al. It does look like rain." I'd have full conversations with game show hosts, agreeing with Pat Sajak and arguing with Alex Trebek about daily double wagers. The mailman became the highlight of my day. I'd wait by the window for him, timing my trip to the mailbox so we could exchange a few words about the weather. Pathetic? Maybe. But when you're drowning in silence, even small talk becomes a lifeline. One evening, a particularly bad evening where I'd cried through dinner and dessert, I was scrolling through Facebook, looking at pictures of Sarah's kids. Emma had lost her first tooth. Ethan had scored a goal in soccer. Lives being lived without me. That's when I saw an ad for a website called Silver Connections. It was a dating site for people over 50. The tagline read, "Your second chapter starts here." The woman in the ad had silver hair and laugh lines and looked genuinely happy. Not fake commercial happy, but real happy. The kind of happy I used to be. I stared at that ad for a long time. 20 minutes, maybe more. Jim had been my only boyfriend. We met in college, in 1974, at a freshman mixer. He'd spilled punch on my new peasant blouse and spent the rest of the night trying to make me laugh as an apology. It worked. The idea of dating at 65 felt like trying to learn a new language. Dating at 20 meant drive-in movies and holding hands between classes. What did dating at 65 even look like? Coffee at 4 p.m. because dinner at 7 was too late? Comparing medications? But the silence was killing me. Not metaphorically. I could feel it eating away at me, hollowing me out from the inside. My doctor had started making noises about antidepressants. Sarah kept sending me articles about senior communities. I wasn't ready to be warehoused yet. I wasn't ready to give up on living. So I clicked the link. Creating a dating profile at 65 is humbling. What do you write? Widow seeks companion for early bird specials and conversations about joint pain? I spent 3 days writing and rewriting 150 words about myself. 3 days of staring at a blinking cursor, trying to sum up 6.5 decades of living in a paragraph. Who was I without Jim? I wasn't sure anymore. I wrote and deleted a dozen versions. Too desperate, too cold, too much information, not enough personality. Finally, I settled on retired teacher who still believes in love stories. I enjoy mystery novels, gardening, and finding new coffee shops. Looking for someone to share Sunday crosswords and life's adventures. Must love dogs. I have a golden retriever named Buddy. Simple, honest, a little hopeful. I uploaded a photo from Sarah's wedding. I'd gotten my hair done and felt beautiful that day. The dress was lavender, Jim's favorite color on me. In the photo, I'm laughing at something the photographer said. I looked alive. I wanted to be that woman again. Then I waited and waited. The first few messages were disappointing. Men who clearly hadn't read my profile, sending generic, "Hey, beautiful" messages. Crude comments that made me blush and wonder what happened to courtship. Dick pics. Yes, apparently that's a thing even in your 60s. I almost deleted my account twice. What was I thinking? Maybe this was the universe's way of telling me Jim had been my one shot at love. Then, on a Thursday evening, just as I was about to give up, I got a message from Robert Walker. "Hello, Margaret. I was struck by what you wrote about still believing in love stories. As a fellow educator, I taught history for 30 years. I understand the power of a good story. Stories shape us, define us, give meaning to our existence. I see you love mysteries. Have you read the latest Louise Penny? Inspector Gamache has become like an old friend to me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Also, I must ask about your golden retriever. I have a golden named Max, who's convinced he's a lapdog despite weighing 80 pounds. Does Buddy have any similar delusions of being a tiny dog? Looking forward to your response. Robert?" I read that message 5 times. He'd actually read my profile. He asked real questions. He mentioned books and dogs, 2 of my favorite topics. His grammar was impeccable. Yes, the English teacher in me noticed. I clicked on his profile. The photo showed a distinguished man, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes. He had crow's feet that suggested a life full of laughter. He was wearing a simple blue button-down, no sunglasses hiding his face, no gym selfie, just a nice, normal photo. He was 68, widowed, lived in Minneapolis. His profile mentioned he had 2 adult sons, loved cooking, especially Italian food, and volunteered at a literacy center teaching adults to read. Life's too short for bad books and bitter coffee, his profile said, seeking someone who agrees. I spent an hour crafting my response. Too long? Too eager? I didn't care. It had been so long since anyone had asked me anything beyond paper or plastic. We messaged back and forth that entire evening. He was witty, intelligent, and genuinely interested in my thoughts. He asked about my favorite mysteries. Louise Penny, of course, but also Tana French. He shared a funny story about Max stealing an entire roast chicken off the counter. When he said goodnight at 11 p.m., I realized I'd been smiling for 3 hours straight. My face actually hurt from using muscles that had atrophied from disuse. Over the next few weeks, Robert and I developed a routine. Morning messages over coffee became the reason I got out of bed. "Good morning, sunshine," he'd write. "What adventure does today hold?" Afternoon check-ins broke up the long, empty hours. "Just thinking of you. Hope your gardening is going well. Save some tomatoes for that bruschetta recipe I sent." Long evening conversations that stretched past midnight made me feel like a teenager again, staying up too late on the phone. Except now it was messages on a screen. He sent me photos of his cooking attempts. His lasagna looked disastrous but endearing, more like abstract art than food. I sent him pictures of Buddy in the garden, usually covered in dirt and looking entirely too pleased with himself. He told me about losing his wife Carol to breast cancer 5 years ago. The long fight, the false hopes, the final goodbye. How he'd held her hand in hospice and promised to live enough life for both of them. She made me swear I wouldn't become one of those widowers who forgets to eat vegetables and wears the same shirt for a week. He wrote, "I'm keeping my promise, but some days it's harder than others." His vulnerability made my heart ache. Here was a man who understood loss, who knew that grief was not something you get over, but something you learn to carry. We compared our griefs like war wounds, finding comfort in shared understanding. "I wasn't looking for this, Margaret," he wrote one evening. "I joined this site because my sons nagged me. 'Dad, you need to get out there,' they said. I figured I'd create a profile to shut them up. Maybe go on a few awful dates to prove I tried. But talking to you feels like coming home, like Carol sent you to me. Is that crazy?" It wasn't crazy. Or if it was, I was crazy too. For the first time in 3 years, I was looking forward instead of backward. I started caring about my appearance again. Putting on lipstick for our video dates, always canceled at the last minute. But I didn't mind. Buying new clothes that weren't just variations of grief's uniform of black and gray. We made plans to meet. He would fly to Tampa in 3 weeks. March 15th? I circled the date on my calendar in red. We'd have lunch at my favorite waterfront restaurant. Walk along the beach. Finally hug after all these weeks of digital intimacy. I bought a new dress, navy blue with tiny flowers that reminded me of forget-me-nots. I got my hair colored, covering the gray that had multiplied since Jim's death. I even got a manicure, something I hadn't done since. I couldn't remember when. Sarah noticed the change in my voice during our calls. "You sound happy, Mom," she said, a mix of joy and concern in her voice. "I haven't heard you laugh like that in years." I was happy, genuinely, surprisingly, miraculously happy. For the first time in 3 years, I was looking forward to tomorrow. Then, 5 days before our meeting, everything changed. The call came at 2 a.m. His voice was broken, shattered. "Margaret, I'm so sorry to call so late. There's been an accident." My heart stopped. Not again. I couldn't lose someone else. "It's James, my son. He was in London for work. A car hit him crossing the street. They don't know if—" He couldn't finish the sentence. I could hear him sobbing, the kind of deep, primal sobs that come from a parent facing every parent's worst nightmare. Robert explained he was flying out immediately. The messages that followed were frantic, desperate. James needed emergency surgery, multiple surgeries. The best neurosurgeon in London. The NHS would do their best. But going private could mean the difference between walking again or not, between full recovery or permanent damage. The hospital required payment upfront. Something about him being an American citizen, insurance complications, international healthcare bureaucracy at its worst. I hate to ask this, Margaret. God, I hate it. But I'm 5-0 short. I have the money, but it's tied up in investments, CDs that don't mature for another month. I can't liquidate fast enough without massive penalties. Could you help me? I'll pay you back as soon as I return. I'll sign anything you want. I can't lose my son. He's only 32. He's getting married next year. Please. My heart broke for him. I'd held Jim's hand through every cancer treatment. I knew the desperation of trying to save someone you love. The way you'd sell your soul for 5 more minutes, let alone a lifetime. Without hesitation, I wired the money. $5,000 flying across the ocean on wings of hope and desperation. You're my angel, Robert texted. I love you, Margaret. When this nightmare is over, I'm going to spend the rest of my life showing you how much. James is going to walk at his wedding because of you. My grandchildren will exist because of you. I'll never forget this. That was the beginning of the end. Though I didn't know it then, too blinded by love and the intoxicating feeling of being needed again. The requests came like waves after that, each one perfectly timed, perfectly reasonable, perfectly urgent. James needed additional surgery when they found bleeding on his brain. Complications with infections that required expensive antibiotics not covered by insurance. A special rehabilitation facility that could mean the difference between full recovery and permanent disability. Hotel bills because Robert couldn't leave his son's side. Flights for James's fiancée, who was 8 months pregnant and shouldn't fly commercial. Each time, Robert promised this would be the last time. Each time, his gratitude was overwhelming. Poems written in hospital waiting rooms. Love letters composed during James's surgeries. Photos of get-well cards he bought for me to give him in person. Each time, I believed him. Because when you're in love, when someone needs you, when you have the power to help, how can you say no? Isn't that what love is? Sacrifice? Jim would have done the same. Jim would have understood. I drained my checking account first. $23,000 accumulated from years of teacher's pension and Social Security. Then savings. $40,000 meant for a new roof, and the trip to Ireland I'd planned to take for Jim. I took out a loan against my 401k, telling myself it was an investment in my future happiness. When that wasn't enough, I remembered Jim's life insurance policy. $100,000 that was supposed to be my safety net, my security, my hedge against loneliness and poverty. But Robert's son was dying. What kind of person would I be if I didn't help? What kind of Christian? What kind of human being? Money was just paper. Love was real. Life was precious. James deserved every chance. The red flags were there, looking back. They always are, aren't they? Like breadcrumbs in a forest you only see on the way out. Robert always had excuses for why we couldn't video chat. The hospital had bad Wi-Fi that only worked for text. He was too emotional. Didn't want me to see him broken. His phone camera was broken from when he dropped it rushing to catch his flight. When I offered to fly to London, he panicked. The stress would be too much for both of us. James wasn't stable enough for visitors. The ICU had strict rules. He needed to focus entirely on his son. When this is over, he'd promise. When James is better, I'll introduce you properly. He already knows all about you. I talk about you constantly. The nurses think I'm crazy. Showing them your picture. My Margaret, I tell them. She saved my son's life. But I was in love. Or I thought I was. The heart wants what it wants, and mine wanted to believe. When you're drowning in loneliness, even a mirage looks like an oasis. When you've been starving for connection, even crumbs feel like a feast. I made excuses for every inconsistency, rationalized every red flag. Love makes fools of us all, but it makes the biggest fools of the desperate. My daughter Sarah started noticing things. "Mom, why are you selling Dad's coin collection?" she asked during one call. "I thought you were keeping that for Ethan." "Why did you cancel your trip to see us?" came next. "We haven't seen you in almost a year. Is everything okay with the house? Do you need money?" If only she knew. I made excuses, said I was downsizing, simplifying my life, embracing minimalism, Marie Kondo and all that. The coins didn't spark joy anymore. Travel was too difficult with COVID. Lies upon lies, building a wall between me and the only people who truly loved me. The truth was, I was sending every penny to Robert. Every memory of Jim converted to cash and wired to accounts in London, then Cyprus, then somewhere else when the hospital changed their billing system. I sold Jim's tools, his golf clubs, his father's watch. Each item a small betrayal, but justified by love. Jim would understand. Jim always said the living were more important than things. 6 months in, I'd sent him 100, my entire life savings, Jim's legacy, our retirement dreams, everything except the house, and I was considering a reverse mortgage for that. I was living on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, telling myself it was a diet. Keeping the heat at 60 to save money for Robert's next emergency. Buddy got the cheap dog food now, and I could see the question in his brown eyes. What happened to the good stuff? That's when Robert disappeared. March 15th came and went. Our anniversary of what would have been our first meeting. I'd worn the blue dress anyway, sitting by the phone, waiting for an explanation. Nothing. His profile vanished from Silver Connections overnight, like he'd been deleted from existence. His phone number was disconnected. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. I called it 50 times, hoping for a different message. The emails bounced back. Delivery failed. User unknown. Even our entire message history on the dating site was gone, as if our 6 months of conversation had been a fever dream. It was like he'd been erased from existence. Like I'd imagined the whole thing, but my empty bank account proved otherwise. The sold treasures, the depleted retirement, the crushing debt, all monuments to my stupidity. I sat in my empty house, Buddy whimpering at my feet, sensing my distress, and the truth hit me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me gasping. There was no Robert Walker. No son named James. No car accident. No hospital in London. No love story. No future. No us. Just me. A lonely old woman who'd been played for a fool. The fool who'd given away everything for nothing. The fool who'd chosen a fantasy over her family. The fool who'd betrayed her dead husband's memory for a ghost. The shame was suffocating, a physical weight on my chest that made breathing difficult. How could I have been so stupid? I taught high school for 35 years. I'd analyzed literature, finding symbolism and meaning in every line. I'd warned my students about online predators, about the dangers of the internet. I'd prided myself on being smart, educated, careful, a woman who read the New York Times and could spot a split infinitive at 50 paces. But loneliness had made me vulnerable, desperate, stupid. And someone had exploited that vulnerability with surgical precision. They'd studied me like I used to study Shakespeare's sonnets, finding every weakness, every soft spot, every avenue of attack. I was a mark, a rube, a cautionary tale. The old woman who gave away her life savings to a stranger on the internet. I could already hear the whispers, see the pitying looks, feel the judgment. I contemplated ending it all that night. The pills were in the medicine cabinet. Jim's leftover pain medication from the cancer, enough to drift off to sleep and never wake up. What was left? I was 67 years old, broke, humiliated. I'd have to sell the house Jim and I had built together. The house where we'd raised our children, hosted Thanksgivings, lived our life. Move in with one of my kids like some charity case. Become the burden I'd sworn I'd never be. The mother who couldn't take care of herself. The cautionary tale whispered about at family gatherings. Remember when Grandma gave all her money to that internet scammer? I wrote letters to Sarah and Michael, tried to explain, apologize. The words looked pathetic on paper. I was lonely. Seemed like such a weak excuse for destroying everything their father had worked for. I thought I was in love. Sounded like something a teenager would say, not a grandmother. How could they forgive me when I couldn't forgive myself? How could they look at me with anything but disgust and disappointment? I sealed the envelopes, wrote their names in shaky handwriting, set them on the kitchen table next to my will and Jim's picture. Then I went to the bathroom and opened the medicine cabinet. The bottle was there, still half full. Enough. More than enough. I poured the pills into my hand, counting them like rosary beads. Then Buddy patted over and put his head in my lap. Those brown eyes looked at me with such trust, such need, such unconditional love. Who would take care of him if I was gone? Who would know he liked his ear scratched just so? That he was scared of thunderstorms and needed someone to sit with him? That he still looked for Jim every morning, hoping this was the day his master would come home? He was all I had left of my old life, the only witness to my happiness. The only one who didn't judge me for my stupidity. I put the pills back in the bottle, put the letters in the garbage disposal, and turned it on, watching my final words turn to pulp. Then I called my daughter instead. Sarah? My voice cracked on her name. Mom? It's 2 a.m. What's wrong? Everything. Everything was wrong. I need help. I need to come home. I need to come there. Can I come there? Of course, Mom. You're scaring me. What happened? I took a deep breath. Jim always said the truth was like ripping off a Band-Aid. Better to do it fast. I've done something terrible. I've lost everything. I was scammed. I gave them all our money. All of it. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The silence on the other end lasted forever. I could hear Sarah breathing, processing, probably calculating how much I'd had and how much I'd lost. Then, quieter than I'd ever heard her. Oh, Mom. Oh, no. Okay. It's okay. We'll figure this out. I'm booking you a flight right now. Today. Can you pack a bag? I started crying then. Ugly, body-shaking sobs that had been building for months. Sarah stayed on the phone with me, making soothing noises, being the parent while I fell apart like a child. Mom, you need to come stay with us. Right now. Today, she said, when I'd calmed down enough to listen. I can't. I'm too ashamed. What will people think? What will the kids think? What will Tom think? I don't give a damn what people think. You're my mother. Get on a plane. We'll sort this out together. But Buddy, bring him. The kids will be thrilled. Mom, please, just come. 2 days later, I was in Seattle, sleeping in my grandson's Spider-Man-themed bedroom while he bunked with his sister. The twin bed with superhero sheets felt like a cosmic joke. Here I was, supposed to be the elder, the wise one, sleeping in a child's bed because I'd been more naive than any child. Sarah and her husband Tom treated me with a gentleness that made me cry. No judgment. No, how could you? No lectures about internet safety or financial responsibility. Just love. Warm meals. Soft hugs. A safe place to fall apart. Tom, God bless him, never once made me feel like an intruder or a burden. Your family, he said simply. This is what family does. Sarah took time off work and we tackled the problem together. She approached it like the engineer she was, systematically, logically, without emotion clouding her judgment. First, the police report. The detective who took my statement was kind, but honest. He'd seen this before. Too many times. These scammers are usually overseas. Nigeria, Russia, the Philippines, sometimes Ghana. They use fake photos stolen from real people's social media, fake names, routing money through multiple accounts and cryptocurrencies. Recovery is unlikely. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I'm not saying impossible, but unlikely. I'm sorry. Unlikely. Such a soft word, for such a hard truth. For the death of hope. For the final nail in the coffin of my dignity. We contacted the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, filed reports with the Federal Trade Commission, notified my bank, though the horse had already left that barn. Or, more accurately, been let out willingly by me, one wire transfer at a time. Each agency took my information with the same mixture of sympathy and resignation. Another old woman? Another romance scam? Another statistic for their files. Then came the forensic accountant Sarah insisted on hiring. We need to know exactly where you stand, Mom. No surprises. The numbers were brutal. Written in black and white, they looked even worse than in my head. I owed 30-0 on the 401k loan, due in installments I couldn't afford. My Social Security would barely cover basic expenses. The house would have to go, no equity left after the second mortgage I'd taken. Credit cards maxed out. Nothing left to sell. A lifetime of careful saving. Destroyed in 6 months. You'll live with us, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. A declaration. A life raft. I can't be a burden. You have your own life. The kids need their space. Tom doesn't need a mother-in-law underfoot. You're not a burden. You're my mother. And you were scammed. This isn't your fault. It's the fault of the criminals who did this to you. But it felt like my fault. Every night, I replayed every conversation with Robert, looking for the signs I'd missed. The inconsistencies I'd explained away. How his writing style sometimes changed. More formal some days. More casual others. How he deflected questions about his past with charming non-answers. How the photos he sent were always slightly blurry, never quite in focus. How he knew so much about Minneapolis but could never tell me his favorite restaurant there. The way he love-bombed me in the beginning, making me feel like the most special woman in the world. How there was always another crisis, right when I was starting to question things. Michael flew in from Chicago, taking time off from his demanding job. My son, the computer programmer, spent days analyzing every email, every message. He had programs I didn't understand, ways of tracing digital footprints. He found things I'd never noticed. The metadata showing the emails originated from Ghana, not London or Minneapolis. Stock photos that had been used on multiple scam sites. Robert's face attached to different names, different stories. The scripts they followed, almost word for word, found on scammer forums where they shared techniques. Mom, this person was a professional. They probably weren't even one person. These operations used teams. Someone to write the love letters, someone else to handle the crisis scenarios, another person to manage the money transfers. They knew exactly what to say, how to build trust, when to strike. You didn't stand a chance. He showed me the scammer forums, translated from various languages. How they called us clients or megas, Nigerian slang for fools. How they shared psychological profiles of the perfect victim, widowed or divorced, isolated, financially stable, emotionally vulnerable. How they had manuals for every scenario, every objection, every doubt. I was a textbook case, a perfect mark. It didn't make me feel better. We found others through online searches. Support groups I didn't know existed. A whole underground world of shame and shared pain. A support group online for romance scam victims. The stories were heartbreakingly similar. Widows and widowers targeted in their grief. Like emotional vampires feeding on loss. Divorcees desperate for connection. For proof they were still lovable. The elderly isolated by distance or disease. Easy pickings for predators who saw dollar signs where there should have been human decency. One woman, Linda from Ohio, had lost her farm. 3 generations of family land gone to a petroleum engineer stuck on an oil rig. Another, Patricia from New York, had mortgaged her house for a doctor working with Doctors Without Borders. Men too. David from California had sent $250 to a woman he thought was a Norwegian nurse, but was probably a team of young men in Lagos. We called ourselves stupid in those forums. Idiots. Fools. But reading their stories, I saw the pattern. We weren't stupid. We were human. We were lonely. We were hopeful. And that humanity had been weaponized against us. Used like a battering ram to break down our defenses and empty our bank accounts. Anger replaced shame around month 3 of living with Sarah. Pure, clean, burning anger that felt like fuel after months of despair. How dare they? How dare someone look at my grief, my loneliness, my capacity for love, and see a mark? How dare they take my memories of Jim, because that's what the money was, crystallize memories, and turn them into their profit? How dare they sleep at night knowing they'd destroyed lives, stolen futures, broken hearts that were already fragile? I dreamed of revenge, of finding them, of looking into their eyes and making them understand what they'd done. But they were ghosts in machines, untouchable across oceans and behind fake names. I want to do something, I told Sarah over breakfast one morning. The kids had already left for school, and we were sitting in her sunny kitchen that looked nothing like my kitchen in Tampa. I can't get my money back, but maybe I can stop this from happening to someone else. Maybe I can make something good come from this disaster. Sarah looked at me over her coffee cup. Jim's favorite mug that I'd given her. One of the few things I hadn't sold. What did you have in mind? I don't know. A blog? A support group? Something. Anything. I can't just be a victim. I need to be more than that. That's when STARS was born. Scam Targets Actually Recovering and Strong. Yes, I know it's a bit of a forced acronym, but I was an English teacher. Sue me. Sometimes you need a little wordplay to make the horror bearable. I started small. A Facebook page where victims could share their stories without judgment. I wrote my own story first. Every humiliating detail. The first love bombing messages. The escalating requests. The moment of realization. The aftermath. I expected silence. Or worse, mockery. Instead, within a week, we had 50 members. Within a month, 500. Within 6 months, 50. The stories poured in like a dam had burst. Not just romance scams, grandparent scams, where fake grandchildren called begging for bail money, IRS scams threatening arrest if you didn't pay in gift cards, tech support scams that gave criminals access to entire life savings. The creativity of cruelty was staggering. The scope was overwhelming. Billions of dollars, millions of victims, and so much silence, so much shame keeping us isolated and easy prey. I learned to recognize the patterns. Love bombing in the first few weeks, overwhelming attention and affection that felt like finally being seen after being invisible. The crisis that required money, always with perfect timing, always with just enough urgency to bypass logical thinking, always urgent, always with a promise of repayment that seemed so sincere. The emotional manipulation. If you really loved me, I thought I could trust you. My life depends on this. You're the only one who can help me. The gradual. Isolation from family and friends who might ask questions. The way they made you feel guilty for doubting them. Turning your own kindness against you. With Sarah's help, I started a blog. Red Flags and Real Talk. A scam survivor's guide. I wrote about my experience. All of it. The embarrassing parts. The desperate 2 a.m. money transfers. The lies I told my family. The moment I realized the truth. The dark night when I almost gave up entirely. The slow climb back to something resembling life. I wrote about the tactics they used. Breaking down each manipulation like the literature teacher I used to be. Analyzing the romance scam like it was a tragic play. Which I suppose it was. The response was overwhelming. Emails from adult children whose parents had been scammed, desperate for resources. Thank you letters from people who'd almost fallen for it but remembered something they'd read on my blog. Stories of near misses where my words had been the thing that made someone pause before hitting send on that wire transfer. Each email was a tiny victory against the vast machinery of deception. A local news station picked up the story. Local teacher loses life savings to romance scam, fights back. I almost said no. The thought of my former students, their parents, everyone knowing what had happened, my reputation, built over 35 years, reduced to a cautionary tale. But then I thought about Jim. What would he say? I could almost hear his voice. Mayor, his nickname for me. If your story helps even one person, isn't your pride a small price to pay? So, I did the interview, sitting in Sarah's living room, Buddy at my feet, telling a reporter how I'd fallen in love with a ghost. The interview aired on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, my email was flooded. Victims wanting to share their stories, family members seeking advice, and surprisingly, messages of support from former students. Mrs. Thompson, you taught me to analyze literature for hidden meanings. Thank you for reminding me to apply that skill to real life. Jennifer, class of 2009. One message stood out. From a woman named Dorothy in Portland. I saw your interview. I've been talking to a man online for 3 months. He asked me for money yesterday for his daughter's cancer treatment. I was about to send it. You saved me. You saved my life. I cried for an hour after reading that. It's been 2 years since Robert Walker vanished with my life savings. 2 years of rebuilding, not just financially but emotionally. I still live with Sarah and her family. What started as a desperate measure has become a gift. I help with the kids, walk them to school, help with homework. My granddaughter Emma tells everyone her Nana is famous on the internet because of my blog. The house in Tampa sold last year. It hurt, signing those papers. But the equity paid off the 401 Kelvin loan and left enough for a small emergency fund. I'm not rich. I'll never be rich again. But I'm stable. Stars has grown beyond my wildest dreams. We have 10,000 members now. We've partnered with AARP to give presentations at senior centers. I've testified before Congress about elder fraud. Me, Margaret Thompson, speaking in the Capitol building. Jim would have been so proud. The best part? We've stopped scams in progress. Members recognize the signs and reach out. We've created a buddy system. Someone to call when you're about to send money to an online love. That moment of pause, that second opinion has saved millions of dollars. Last month, I got a call from the FBI. They'd arrested a scam ring operating out of Ghana. My case was part of the evidence. 15 people were sending money to the same account I'd used. Robert Walker was actually named Kwame. He was 23 years old. 23, young enough to be my grandson. In his confession, he talked about the training they received, how to target widows, what to say, when to introduce the crisis. It was all scripted. My great love story was someone else's business model. They recovered some money, though most was long gone. Luxury cars and houses in Accra. I'll get maybe $5,000 back. It's something. But here's what I've really recovered. Myself. I'm not the same Margaret who clicked on that dating site 3 years ago. That woman was running from grief, desperate to fill a void. This Margaret? She's scarred but stronger. Poorer but purposeful. I'm dating again. His name is Harold, and I met him at Sarah's church. He's 70, really lives in Seattle, and has never once asked me for money. We take things slow, coffee dates, walks with Buddy. He knows my story. Everyone does, and he doesn't care. We've all got our something, he said on our third date. Yours just cost more than most. The nightmares have mostly stopped. The ones where Jim is disappointed in me for losing our nest egg. Now, when I dream of him, he's usually smiling. Sarah says I've found my calling. Maybe she's right. If my humiliation can be someone else's education, if my loss can be someone else's gain, then maybe it wasn't all for nothing. Listen, if you've made it this far in my story, you're probably here for a reason. Maybe you're lonely. Maybe you're talking to someone online. Maybe you're worried about a parent or a friend. Whatever brought you here, please remember this. If someone you've never met in person asks you for money, any amount, any reason, that's your red flag. That's your sign to stop, take a breath, and talk to someone you trust. Because real love doesn't come with a price tag. Real love doesn't need your bank account number. Real love can wait for you to be sure. And if you've already been scammed, if you're sitting where I was 2 years ago, staring at an empty bank account and a broken heart, you're going to survive this. I know it doesn't feel like it. I know the shame feels like it's going to swallow you whole. But you will get through this. You are not alone. You are not stupid. You are human. And someone took advantage of your humanity. That's on them, not you. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think twice about that online relationship, or if it helped you understand what your loved one is going through, please share it. Subscribe to hear more stories of survival and recovery. Hit that notification bell because I post new videos every week about staying safe online and rebuilding after fraud. And remember, your worth isn't measured in dollars. Don't let anyone, real or fake, convince you otherwise. Stay safe out there, friends, and thank you for listening to my story.